Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Role-Playing Games for Your Series. Today we're going to be talking about how to create role-playing games, what some of the concerns necessary are, and whether or not it might be a good fit for you. We're going to start with some prepared questions, which I'm going to give to the panelists, and then after they've answered those, we're going to open up the floor to you guys to ask whatever questions you have. So anything you want to know is fair game about their personal lives, their history, their secrets, anything you want to know. So my first question, I think I'm going to start with Craig. Why did you decide to start a role-playing game, to make a role-playing game? What prompted that?
I grew up, I'm a child of the 60s, and I grew up reading Robert E. Howard and Jules Verne, H.G. Wells, and all those good, great stories, Edgar Rice Burroughs. And then I lived very close to Lake Geneva. My brother goes in the Air Force in 1974, and in 1976 he gives me a Christmas present. It's this box set of D&D. And from then, it's like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing ever. So my history is I grew up with role-playing games, and it excited my imagination. So a lot of my stories, if you dissect them, you'll see, oh, this guy was just making rolls. This was an initiative roll that he failed. This was one that he got a crit, whatever it might be. So that's almost all of my stories, that's how they're shaped, as a DM might deal with the players and deal with decision making and shape the world. How much do you tell them? You know, oh, is it a 10-foot wide corridor, 50 feet deep, stone walls? Sometimes that gets boring. I like playing with miniatures, so I just show them. You're walking down a corridor, a stone corridor, and leave it at that. So you'll see that in my prose as well. So for me, that's the critical part of how I shape it into my stories.
Jason, same question, then let's hear from Stephen, please.
What was the question? Yeah, I'm Jason Anspach, and I'm the co-creator of Galaxy's Edge, which is military science fiction. So I thought we were talking about acting, and we said role-playing, and now I'm not sure. No, truth be told, so slightly different generation than Craig, because my first introduction was 2nd edition. And so I remember getting a D&D 2nd edition, and just a friend of mine, you were playing it and got the rules so wrong, and I still don't know if we have to go figure it out like properly. But so, like a lot of you, it was kind of growing up as a part of life, being really heavily involved. I love the Lord of the Rings. I love that whole fantasy element, and so because of the success we had in science fiction, an opportunity arose to do something in fantasy, and we said we know how we want to market it, and it's going to involve a role-playing game, and that led us to the development that we're in.
Hi, I'm Stephen Lee. I'm the founder of Fireside Creations. I've been playing role-playing games since the 70s, and we've been creating role-playing games since the mid-80s. We actually did this backwards. We created a role-playing game first, which we used really as a way of telling stories among the crowd, so everybody participates to create the story. And then from there, we started writing short stories and selling anthologies, and now we're doing novels.
So our next question, I'm going to go back to Stephen on this one, and we'll reverse the order. Did you create the game yourself? And I think you already know the answer to this, but why did you do it yourself versus working with somebody else developing the game?
Okay. I designed the universe the game is set in, but I worked with James Ward, who was one of the original TSR employees, to create our first role-playing game. What was the other part of the question?
Did he do a lot of the mechanics, or were you involved in that?
I worked with him closely at every level. So he took my world draft, he took my initial mechanics, and then he expanded on them. And then we kind of worked together to finalize it.
So Jason, same question?
Yeah, same answer. Exact same answer. We came up with a concept that we wanted, but we were aware of our own shortcomings, and so we reached out to James Ward, and Craig, probably same situation, right? So when there's someone around there that has that level of experience and you're able to work with them, you don't pass on that opportunity. So, but really, similar situation. You have an idea and you say, help me make this not terrible. And he can thankfully do that.
Craig, same question?
I reached out to this game designer from the 70s named James M. Ward. and took his game and we made stories out of him. And Metamorphosis Alpha, that was the first RPG that I ever bought myself with my own money out of the Tactical Studies rules in the box set that I got of D&D. It had a flyer in there with ads for stuff, and MA was one of them, so I bought that with my own money. $5 is what it cost with shipping from Lake Geneva. And I carried that with me my whole time in the Marine Corps. No matter where I went, I had the original rules of MA. And always read it. And this makes me a little bit different than the other folks in that I always just read the rules and reread and used my imagination and never really played. Never played MA. That's it's all about the imagination, fueling the imagination.
So did you play Chainmail? What was your first role-playing game?
It was no, not Chainmail. It was D&D.
D&D, so the white box set?
The white box.
Yeah, for me it was the red box set. Yeah, so what was your first role-playing game?
Yeah, it was second edition, and we got into like for some reason we really got into Al-Qadim and Spelljammer. I don't know why, but we just thought those were the coolest things. So we were just doing Arabian Nights and doing all that. We read Dragonlance a little bit, but I just don't know what it was about Spelljammer and about Al-Qadim, but we could not stop playing those expansions. So that was what we spent our time doing.
My first role-playing game was Travel. And then
Love Travel.
when D&D came out, we switched to that.
Good times.
Yeah, I should give an honorable mention to the West End game Star Wars version. We played that a lot too, where you'd like throw like 600 six-sided dice onto the table and just sort it out. That was a popular one as well.
My role-playing game uses very similar mechanics because I love the West End Star Wars so much.
Yeah.
So, Craig, what would you say the biggest hurdle that you've run into thus far in creating this role-playing game is? What are you running into in terms of challenges?
I'm finding usable mechanics, which means a lot of play testing. And if you work with somebody like James M. Ward, you shortcut that because he can visualize how it's supposed to work, and he streamlines the system. But if you start from scratch, that you have to do a lot of play testing because no one person can think of it all. And there's going to be oddities and things that people throw in and how you deal with that. The shortcut is, the DM can decide. And that's the theater of the mind approach of RPGs.
Jason, are you seeing similar issues in developing the game?
Yeah, the playtesting part is a big aspect of it, and as writers, you're kind of used to just controlling everything, and so it's done when you say it's done, and so we've run into that big time. We're like, oh yeah, everything's done. Like, how long have you been playing your role-playing game?
2 years.
2 years, right? Like, it doesn't take you 2 years to write a book, does it? No,
not even
like
close,
2 days.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a big thing. The other is like, honestly, it's financial. Like, getting enough art to make a role-playing game source book look good is not cheap at all. And like, if I'd have known that, then when Nick was like, let's do a role-playing game, I might have said, no, let's not do a role-playing game. But we're committed, and we're going from there. But I would say those are the two big things is, wow, this is expensive, and man, this is taking a long time, but you got to get it right.
Yeah, I'll echo that. Working with the artists was the most difficult part. We hired 15 artists and ended up working with 6 of them. Beyond that, the budget. The budget was a lot higher than anticipated because we released our set to have the look and feel of the original D&D box set. So we had a lot of extra material and cost. But it went over really well. We had 2,600 fans in the first 30 days.
Nice. Very nice.
So this one's my favorite question. Have you played your role-playing game? And if so, what was it like to play your own game for the first time?
I'll defer on that one because I did not develop my own RPG.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, so I know there's a whole play group. I've said, I'm not going to play this until it's completely done. Like, that's been my rule. So Nick has been playing it all the time. I wanted to go in completely fresh. So just kind of our idea was, let me see it when we say, this is done, this is ready to go to the market, and then I'll have this ability to say, yeah, I get it, or man, I do not get what we just created. We need to start over. So I've been specifically saying a virgin, but it's by choice. It's by choice when it comes to playing this old game. I don't want to play it until it's completely finished.
I did all our playtesting in-house with a few volunteers, and playing it for the first time for me was quite strange because James wanted to create a card-based role-playing game, which is very different, but it was very entertaining. We've been running it since 2014 at GaryCon, and playing it for the first time with James running it was a very good experience. It went really fast, everybody enjoyed it.
That's awesome. Did he kill everybody?
Yes, he did.
Yeah. He's notorious for just killing everybody when you play with James.
I died in that playtest.
I love that he wiped out the party. Okay, so if an author decides, and this is at Craig, if an author decides to create a game, what do you feel they need to know before they get started?
They need to know, I'm a big fan of knowing your logistics, and Jason went into that. You need to know your costs, you need to line up your artists, you need to put together your timeline. And the timeline of a game development, because you don't control every aspect of it, is significantly longer than writing a book. Like you said, you've been working on yours for 2 years. So if you're trying to launch a book in conjunction with an RPG or do the RPG first, like you might do a video first or a long pre-order, you really have to step up the pace. The hard thing is you have to have enough money, you have to have enough time, and you have to have enough resources, which means artists.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that is also having a good answer for yourself as to why you're doing this. I think, like, I know Chris, for you, it was always a dream. For Nick, it was a dream to do that sort of thing. But from a business perspective, like, what's your end goal? Is it a loss leader? It's an expensive loss leader. If it is, are you looking to profit off of the game as like a separate part of your business? Like, what is your goal there? Because if you know that ahead of time, if it's just value added for your readership, just to say, hey, and by the way, you can also play this, then that's going to impact how you produce it. You don't necessarily have to go as all out with the art or a lot of the other things. People will be more forgiving depending on what your end goal is with it. So, but that's something you have to decide up front because it becomes very difficult or very expensive to change horses midstream.
Yeah, the art is extremely important, just like your book covers. A lot of fans will buy the game products just because of the art on the cover, even if they don't play the games. But the reason for creating a role-playing game is it gives a completely immersive experience to your fan base, which means they become diehard fans. And most people who play a game, most people who play your game are going to end up buying all of your books. And we've seen about a 40% conversion from people who read our books to our game.
If I can do a follow-on.
Please do.
When it comes to what do you want to do with this game, if you want to make money off it, that requires a physical presence at conventions. You need to go to, how many would you recommend, Stephen? Like 10 to 12 a year if you really wanted to make money, and you have to get game masters then running that game at the show. And
you're going to need to have a booth at least 8 conventions, and you need a presence at probably a dozen where people are running your game.
A booth and a presence and running games. I used to be in historical miniatures, and I developed a number of rule sets. And the biggest issue with selling those games was running them at shows. You had to have resources running games at like every freaking show out there. So that's, if you're doing role playing, you've got a lot of competition, and you need to have a physical presence, and you need to make sure those games run.
So this is a big question in my opinion when it comes to deciding whether or not you're going to make a role-playing game and how to design it. Should you make your game compatible with some version of Dungeons and Dragons, or should you create an entire unique system, and why?
I would say make it compatible because of the crossover capability, because what sells games is scenarios. You get those scenarios, Expedition to the Barrier Peaks, everybody knows that one, right? And that, it sells the rule set. Well, if you have scenarios that are backward compatible or adapted in such a way that, oh, here are the 5e conversion charts in the back, then you can sell those scenarios. And I found that my rule sets were not as lucrative as my scenarios when selling historical miniature gaming.
No, that's a great idea. I should probably do that. Yeah. All right, but you know, what I've seen is like a lot of times, if you get a passionate fan base, they kind of do the work for you. So, like with Galaxy's Edge, we've got probably like 4 or 5 different homebrew versions of a compatible RPG that just fans have made their own. Yeah. So, but that speaks to what you're saying. Like that's what they want. You know, they don't necessarily want you to reinvent the wheel for them.
I'm going to start with it depends. If your goal is to grab role-playing game fans and bring them to your novels, then absolutely make it compatible with D&D. If your goal is to provide an extension of your universe so people can become immersed in it, then if you have unique rules in your universe, then I would definitely create your own system.
All right. Next question, and this one is near and dear to me because next month I'm going to be answering it. Have you run a successful Kickstarter, and if so, what did you learn from it?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, no, we funded it in-house, so no Kickstarter here, but I'd like to hear the answer.
We've run three Kickstarters. They've all been very successful. Out the door, the first Kickstarter raised about $25,000 for a game no one had ever heard of, in a universe they had never heard of, and card-based, where most role-playing games are dice-based. So we had a lot going against us, but it was still extremely successful. So that's a great way to go.
All right, that's the sum total of prepared questions. So if you guys have questions, we would love you to come up and start asking those. I'm going to pass this microphone, or that microphone, out to you guys, and we'll answer your questions. You can ask anybody on the panel or everybody, and we'll pass the mic around to get some answers.
Hey, I actually have two, because one, I'd like to hear the names of your systems so that I know what to look up later. And the question I have is, why did you choose to do kind of custom development of a system rather than using some of the open source that you could have built off of?
I guess I'll answer both of those, and then I'll pass it to you. So I'm sorry, the first question?
Name of your system.
The Magitech Chronicles. Second question?
Why did you build up your own custom system instead of using some of the open source ones that you could just piggyback on the rule system?
Because they're bad. So for me, RPG design is a passion, and I've been doing this since I was like 6 or 7 years old. So this is something I'm hugely into. It's a passion project. And the mechanics that I'm working on for my game, the goal is to create something that's streamlined. So if you play something like Dungeons & Dragons, you're going to have 3-hour combats, and that's not something that most players enjoy. I want 15-minute combats, and so I was trying to create that directly in a system that more supported a narrative option. So as an example, one of my mechanics is every character will choose a flaw, and you voluntarily play out that flaw, and if you play it out in a way that disadvantages you, you'll receive luck, which is very powerful and can be spent to your betterment. So I'm trying to create systems that are fairly unique and support storytelling in a way that makes it fun for the players.
Yeah, so ours is called Forgotten Ruin, and I think a big part of it was just wanting to do something that, good or bad, was our own, that we control, and just part of the process is just doing it and being, just like writing a novel, being able to see, hey, is this idea that we have as good as we think it is? Is it going to be as fun as we think it is? And the only way you can really answer that is just by going out on your own. But it doesn't mean that you have to do that.
Our sci-fi system is called All 77 Worlds. Our fantasy system is called Dragon Skills. They use the same core engine. We built our own core engine because our games are story-based. We wanted the engine to be light and fast, something we could teach the people at a convention in 5 minutes, and jump into a game.
Even though I have space adventure and some fantasy novels, I won't do an RPG for it because I don't see the viability in my time for a business purpose is better spent writing books. So I will slave off others, and you have licensing issues. By working with James M. Ward and Metamorphosis Alpha, I paid him the licensing fee, and I have full access to the MA brand. I get to put that brand specifically on my books.
Awesome, thank you.
Hi. What kind of advertising did you do to reach people through your Kickstarter? And did you work primarily through like a neutral audience or to people who had read your books?
My books were not out until after the role-playing game for me, so I'm a little different. Our advertising we reached out to 3 of the largest companies that were not Hasbro and had them advertise our Kickstarter. So John Goodman and Steve Chanel from Troll Wars, they already had huge fan bases. And my design partner, James Ward, had done work with them. So we were able to reach out to all of their fan bases, and then we ran straight advertisements on search engines.
Did I answer your question? I think he's
Yes.
the only one who's run out.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Terry.
If your system is successful, have you ever thought, maybe I should license the actual core system to other people that want to create their own role-playing games and create some kind of chain thing of other role-playing games that use your same system?
I have. I'm going to be using the system for all of my different properties, and then once it's polished enough, I plan to have a very inexpensive licensing fee for other people. So I don't want to charge a lot for it. I want to create something that is really fun that other people can use and then tell them about it.
Man, I should have just waited for that licensing. That would have been a lot cheaper. Yeah, no kidding. No, I think that, this kind of, I don't want to say it's a no-brainer, but yeah, like if you could get that kind of a success, I would jump all over it.
Our core system is the word card system, and we've licensed it to 3 other companies. So,
Awesome. Thanks, Terry. Mr. Gregg.
Hey guys. So I have a question about sci-fi systems. The universe, the galaxy is really wide and varied, and one of the things that I noticed from the old Star Wars game was you throw a Jedi into the mix and suddenly your whole party's unbalanced and you have to worry about trying to scale things appropriately. What do you guys do to try to scale things for a sci-fi system?
I don't make classes that are blatantly more powerful than the others.
Yeah, and same thing, no Jedi, so it becomes much easier that way.
all of our character types that people can play are at a similar power level. They're all unique. So each character type has to have the ability to have a story built around it for future novels. But no one character type is going to be super powerful compared to another. Game balance is critical.
Cool. Thanks.
What formats are you publishing in? For instance, are you doing hardback versions or Kindle versions, and are you having to print through ink from Spark, or how are you actually getting the game out there as a?
So I'm not planning on doing a hard copy initially. I looked at the profit margins there and they're just not there. So what I'm planning on doing is releasing directly through World Anvil, which allows me to install a number of software features. So you can do things with it that you can't do with a standard book, and then I'll also have a PDF version for it available.
Yeah, I give a big thumbs up to World Anvil.
Yeah, same to that, only our plan from the beginning has been to give the main thing away because it's largely a marketing tool for us first. And then if it really takes off, you hope that you can make some money on the back end with modules and things like that. But distribution is just what's the most effective way to get it to as many people as possible.
Yeah.
We sell ours in various ebook formats and PDFs, but everything we produce is sold as a physical book. We own our own print shop.
That's handy. That's handy. Yeah, that's a good. Did you sell through drive-through RPG and stuff like that as well?
The core system is sold through drive-through RPG, but I don't care to give them that much of my profit for everything else.
Sure. Okay. Thanks very much.
Me again.
Yes, sir.
So I'd like to know what your favorite mechanic is that you built into your system, and the least favorite mechanic you've seen in a system you've played.
My least favorite mechanic is the D20 roll. The reason for that is because it has too broad of a statistical variance. You could roll a 1 or you could roll a 20, and this takes away the power from the player. So if I've got a character that's supposed to be an expert swordsman, I could roll that 1 and fail and feel bad. And I've had this happen to players where they'll just keep rolling badly in sessions and it'll sort of hamstring their enjoyment. So that's my least favorite mechanic. My favorite mechanic, and this was originally pioneered by games by like White Wolf or Shadowrun or West End Games, is taking a whole bunch of dice and rolling them together. So if I have, let's say, a 5 agility and a 3 firearm skill, I've got 8 dice to roll, and then I'm getting multiple successes. and that flattens out the curve so that somebody who's good at something is really good at something.
Buff White Wolf.
Yeah, that's actually, I love that mechanic. That's great. That's one of my favorite mechanics. One of the things that we disliked in a lot of D&D games that we would play is the monsters just relentless. Sort of like monsters show up and they just kind of wait their turn to be killed by the player characters. And so when we came up with what passes as our monster manual, a big part of that was we came up with a chart of aggressiveness and just personality traits so that we could try to mirror how should these guys react in a battle? Should they even engage the party? Like, if you roll up a random encounter, are the 3 goblins really going to take on, the troop of level 20 players with all these handlers behind? And a lot of just default models, that's one of my least favorite things. It's like, well, they've got to attack, so let's go.
Run away.
Yeah, and everyone else is like, free XP, this is great, but we wanted something that just kind of reflected a more realistic, how realistic can you be with a werewolf, but a more realistic encounter mechanic where you're looking at the monster's looking at how do I get out of this situation? What's my way out, as opposed to, all right, well, I'm surrounded, I'll keep fighting.
Okay, my least favorite mechanic is any role-playing game that uses a single die to determine anything, because you don't have a probability curve. Mirroring what he said, all of our encounters have an attitude that is recorded, so you know how they're going to react, what they're going to do. Not every encounter is resolved in combat. My favorite mechanic is the one we put into our own system. In our system, every player gets 4 creation cards. You think of them as pre-roll results. And they can play those at any point in the game. So they have to decide whether they want to play them early, so they have a chance of drawing those cards again, or whether they want to save them for a critical moment when they must not get hit or when they must succeed a skill or a feat.
Do those reset every session?
They do not. They're for use once per game day.
I like that.
It works pretty well.
Awesome.
I'm a huge fan of the rules-free approach, complete theater of the mind, no dice, no cards, no anything, and it goes to the quality of the story, the quality of the engagement. Here's what I do and why. And then the DM, is that going to move the story forward, or have they made a fatal error? Like, we're going to run into that gelatinous cube and slice it up from the inside. Okay, well, we're going to call it a fatal error and you're going to die. And you don't need to roll any dice, you're not going to get a saving throw, you're just dead.
Thank you.
Sure. Trevor?
Another question. I'm a big-time miniature painter. Do you guys have any plans for miniatures, or what do you think about that?
I've done very little research into this, so where I'm at right now is Hero Forge will allow you to create 3D images that you can print, and so I thought about maybe getting myself a 3D printer and kind of messing around and seeing what I can do, but it seems like a very expensive proposition, and I'm a little bit loath to invest it without knowing more, so I'm going to listen to the other answers.
Yeah, our next phase involves that, but it's more in the lines of we'll make the 3D models and you can print them out royalty-free and just have fun with them. That's our thought.
Now, we currently use miniatures because my science fiction game is really post-apocalyptic. There's a lot of miniatures out there for older games, Game World, Versus Alpha, and so forth that work pretty well. We also have a line of miniatures that are currently being developed by a company in Ohio, and we are going to make the SLT files available for people with home 3D printers.
Cool. Thanks. Oh, sorry.
And there's also a lot of free resources out there for people who have modeled 3D for 3D printers. But that's commercially, if you're selling your games, I think Nick and Jason might be able to get away with, hey, here's some miniatures you can use, because they're not charging for their game. But if you would charge for that game, then I would think you would have to license using somebody else's free miniatures. But if you're just having a game, there's all kinds of resources out there right now.
Any final questions? We actually get out of here early. All right, well, I'm going to put a question to the panelists. Do you guys have any questions or anything else that you would like to say?
No.
So do you guys recommend doing it?
Absolutely. And I will say this.
If you were doing it as a passion project because you love role-playing games, you grew up playing role-playing games, and this has been your dream since you were a kid, knock yourself out. If you're looking at this like, oh, people are moving into role-playing games and it's the next big thing, this is not a profit center. It is not a profit center at all.
Yeah, I can't add to that. That is absolutely correct.
Most new role-playing games do not sell well. We have made a profit with ours, but that's rare. So you really have to look at this as more of a support tool for your existing fan base. And you may be able to bring other role-playing people into it if your universe is interesting enough to attract their attention. Now, if you create a campaign world based on your novels, and then you make your game system compatible with D&D, you may do quite well with it.
You want something that's inexpensive that you can use as a marketing tool to affect gamers. This is where I love Steve Jackson games. Ogre, you have Sticks and Stones, you have Kung Fu 2100. Anybody remember that one? Great games. You look at Tom Wam's games. He's still around. He's still designing games. A quick board game, something you could put out and use as a marketing thing that you could put in a Ziploc, for Christ's sake. And that was a huge win with Ogre. When it first came out, it was in a Ziploc. You unfold the map, you unfold the rules, and it's like 6 or 8 pages. It's like Limeys and Slimies, the naval boarding warfare game. Very simple and simplicity. So would I do that? Absolutely, because I have all my historical miniature gaming rule systems that I could tap and come up with something fairly quickly and print out a hex chart, throw a few things on there, and have something that I can market to gamers to bring them on board, especially for free, because the price of entry there would be probably about $1.50 per copy, $2, a little more than a Moo card, your business card made by Moo. Those are kind of spendy. They're really nice, but hey, what if you had an actual board game that you could put out for $1.50 and put out on your table at a convention? Hey, this is something based on my books, and you get them on board. Hey, I love this. And then they can see it in their mind better when they're reading your books, and it becomes a game to them. And that's like, as authors, for the words, you gamify stuff. And that's the world we live in today, as gamification is a big thing.
Well said. You had a question, sir?
Please. You had mentioned making excuse me. You had mentioned making your game compatible with another system. That's what I was curious about. How does that even work? I mean, do you contact the game manufacturer and say, hey, can I build a module for your world? Do you just build it and the rules are cool? Do you have to pay them for their licensing to do the rules? How does that work?
I'll pass it over to Steve in a second. It depends on the system is the short answer. For D&D, with their 3rd edition, they created something called the Open Gaming License, which still exists today. So if you wanted to write content using the 3rd edition D&D system, you can still use their rules free of charge as long as you follow the guidelines in that open agreement. Pathfinder, which is one of the more dominant games, fantasy games these days, they have a much more restrictive license, as do most other companies.
When I say making it compatible with D&D, specifically Wizards of the Coast, when they owned the property, before they were acquired by Hasbro, put out the SRD, which allowed you to create all that content and sell it commercially free of charge.
Thank you.
All right, guys, I guess we're out of here 6 minutes early. Thank you so much for coming. We really, really appreciate your time and attention.